And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. And today, my guest is Robbie Samuels. Robbie is really interesting. He's sort of a new friend. He is an author. He is a podcaster. He is a consultant. He is an advisor. And he is with us. So without further ado, welcome aboard, Robbie.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So if you and I would have bumped into each other 10 or 15 years ago, and I said, hey, where are you going to be in now? You would have nailed it, right? You would have predicted exactly what you're going to be doing and who you're going to be working with, right?
100%. Not at all. 100%
Exactly.
not at all.
100% not at all. So, or 0% accurate. So
0%
how did all, I'm always fascinated by this. So how the hell did you get here? How did this happen?
Well, years ago, I fell in love, like 30 years ago, with event planning.
Okay.
Not with the event planning part, but with the idea of bringing people together. It was always sort of the thing I loved to do, even before that. And so I got jobs doing that and then realized that was something I could do in nonprofits. And so then I was running nonprofits and like running their fundraising events. But I wanted to meet more people like-minded. And so I started running this community group, a meetup group that grew to thousands of members. We ran it for 11 years. I think it was there that I started to realize I had skills around networking. And then I spent a decade becoming known for my expertise in the world of networking. And I wrote a book about networking at conferences. And then the pandemic hits.
Like conferences, remember conferences,
Yeah.
Refresh my memory. It's been a while. What?
Right. The reasons we used to get on planes, right?
Right,
Like
exactly.
no planes.
Planes.
Yeah. So people
Crying
used to get
babies.
on
It's
planes.
coming back to me. Yeah.
Not just for the content, but they used to get on planes for the possibility of meeting amazing people. And that was what the intention was, but our follow through was pretty dismal. So I was working in the space of trying to help close the gap between what people set their intentions around networking at conferences and then actually achieving results. So a book, a TEDx, podcast, all those things. Basically, everything I know how to do is not useful in the world of March 2020. And
but let's stay there for a minute, because I too was guilty of going to far too many events, far too often, et cetera. And then COVID hits and you're going, okay, well, why was I doing that? Right. So on the one hand, it's the content. Somebody made it really easy to put everything I'm interested in one place for 3 days. But there's also this community piece, like part of the reason, and people don't always, I don't say they're dishonest, but they're not as upfront about it as they might be. Like, hey, Robbie lives in one city, Peter lives in another. I know once a year he's one of 10 people I like to see at the ABC Co event. And it's partly why I go. So now that things are, well, sort of reopening, where do you see it going? Because on the one hand, I don't see us going back to 2019, but I don't see it going to zero. So where does the dust settle?
Well, I had set a prediction years ago that we were going to realize how important in-person was, and that the organizations that design really engaging in-person events were going to succeed with these younger generations, which the younger generations sort of hadn't seen the need for in-person because they're very wired in. And I still think that's the case. I think some organizations are going to really nail a thoughtful in-person event. It'll be more meaningful than it was in 2019 for people to come together. So
the bar's been raised. So stay there for a second, because the other thing that I recall, all these events going to, how many people went without, and I don't want to sound, whatever, but without an agenda. Why are you going to this event? And to me, if you didn't go with a sense of intent and deliberateness, doesn't mean you don't leave yourself open to serendipity and randomly bumping into someone and making a new friend. But like, these are the people I want to meet. I'm going to set those up, set up the coffee, set up the cocktails, host a dinner, do all those things. A lot of people, quite frankly, were pretty poor conference attendees, if you will, which is probably the gist of your Robbie 1.0 or whatever number that was.
Exactly that. There was a study by the International Association of Exhibitions and Events found that 76% of people surveyed said that networking was a top driver for why they chose to attend an event. But I don't think 76% of people going to events create a plan for how they were actually going to achieve their networking goals. Right? It's we have these amazing intentions, like, oh, that's the reason I want to go. But in reality,
so what are you doing about it? Right.
That's what I mean by, I think that the people who do choose to go into in-person events going forward are going to do so much more thoughtfully, with more purpose. But I also think the value of the virtual space is now undeniable.
Going back to what I was saying earlier, people go for content, people go for community, people go for connection. And the content is pretty easy to do virtually, right? And we can even do that asynchronously. We don't need to have one of these 3-day summits or whatever. I haven't seen yet. I've seen people making really good tries and a lot of creativity being applied. I haven't really seen anybody crack the code on this is the best way to create connection and community in a remote world. Going way back to early 2020, it started with the virtual cocktail hours. Let's all sit here and get drunk together. Okay, well, that sort of faded out. But what are you seeing that's really cool and innovative that you think might stick?
Well, one thing I have to sort of note is that on March 13th, 2020, I started hosting a virtual happy hour. My reaction to the pandemic was to try to show up and add value. I've actually
Yep.
hosted that weekly event that became the No More Bad Zoom virtual happy hour every week since. And it is not about getting together with cocktails. It is a community that is developed with like hundreds of
Yep.
people have come through, businesses have formed, people are connecting. So I think that there's a space for those kind of community driven, events. And then when I work with my clients as a virtual event design consultant and executive Zoom producer, I'm trying to help them think about how to bring their events online with less stress and greater participant engagement. If you don't do it thoughtfully, you will end up with the formula of 45 minutes of a presentation and 15 minutes of Q&A, which is the like old style webinar format that was never a great format, but no one questioned it. It was sort of bonus content. Now that virtual events are synonymous with events, we have to do better at creating the engagement piece online and breakout rooms and coffee conversations and pre-reads. Like there's a lot of things that people are doing. I think are very creative. Zoom's a great platform for it, but it's not just Zoom. There's just about how do you intentionally bring people together. And I think that's the piece that has to shift, whether it's in person or online.
Yeah.
The
So
intentionality.
I agree. And I think that even redefining an event, because it used to be beginning, middle, end. Oh, we open on, Tuesday morning and we do the plenary and then, and then everybody leaves on Thursday, whatever. I also started right around, I don't know if it's exactly the same time frame as you, but I would think within a couple of weeks in March of 2020, I had a lot of friends and clients and colleagues and such reaching out to me going, oh my God, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And as a consultant who's used to having the answers and being able to help people, it was a really weird place for me to be to go, geez, listen, I wasn't around in 1918. I don't know how this sucker is going to work out. So I took some inventory and said, listen, I have two things. I have a really good network of amazing people that are interesting and helpful and generous. And I've got the, whatever it's called, the Turbo Zoom $40 a month account. Voila. Right. So let me put that together. And we too did every Tuesdays at 1:00, and we ran it for a year and a half. We just went to every other Tuesday now. And what's interesting in the beginning, there's a lot of folks that would poke in and poke out and sniff it around, like anything else. But there's this really interesting core of about 25 folks that show up almost religiously. There have been 3 books that have been written, a business that's been launched, similar things that you were talking about. So I think you have to also have some patience and let people realize what's there. And I think there's a sense of not being on. Like the first couple of weeks, there's a little bit of the chest pounding and look how great I am or whatever, but letting it down like, hey, I'm scared. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like 50% of my business just went out the window. I'm vulnerable. How can we help each other? And I think that takes some time and trust to form.
I mean, you're talking about all the storming, norming, forming, right? Like how do
Yeah, yeah,
communities,
yeah, yeah.
how do groups form? I think it happens online at a different pace than in person, but it does happen with that intentionality behind it. I think that a lot of people were scared of the online. I've had clients who've hired me knowing what I do and then say, we're going to do a Zoom webinar and we're going to turn off chat and we're going to have
Yeah.
questions coming through Q&A, but only people can see only their own questions. They can't see anyone else's. And we're going to pre-write the questions. I'm like, okay, so basically you're putting bags over people's heads and muzzling them as they come in.
Yeah, that sounds
would
like
you
fun.
do this in
Right,
person? Right. Like,
right.
and it's like they're so nervous about it going off the rails and someone grabbing a mic. In person, this would happen too. Like you'd have an open mic
Well, but with all
moment.
due respect, Robbie, I mean, event planners, that's basically Latin for control freak. I have several friends that are event planners, and every successful event planner is a micromanager and a control freak. And I mean that with all due respect, because we don't want those people to be like me that are sort of big picture people and it'll all work out. It's like, no, at 12 o'clock, 300 people are expecting lunch,
Totally get it. I just think that they're not being innovative and creative. And, it's not about replicating what we did in person. It's about
Yeah.
reimagining using a mixture of virtual and digital and also even analog tools. So I think that, once they see the possibility, and now, what was fine in person, what was fine online in, like, I don't know, May 2020. I actually remember, Peter, in May 2020, I went on a call. Someone was going to show us how to use various aspects of Zoom, including breakout rooms. But the trainer was using someone else's Zoom, and that Zoom did not have breakout rooms enabled. So we had to all leave and come back in. And as we were leaving, she said, okay, so what I learned last time this happened is you have to spend 30 seconds before coming back in. And all I heard was, this happened before.
And you didn't fix it? Right. I heard last time. Right.
Like, this is a
pilots don't say that when they're crashing, right? Like the last time.
The professional speaker walking into Marriott and saying, oh, I was going to have slides, but I forgot to ask for a projector. Like, so now a year and a half later, that is, the bar of what's okay has really, really risen. And there are organizations.
Well, that bar has risen. So in the last year and a half or so, at first we gave people a lot of leeway, like, that might be your laundry in the background. Oh, your lighting might be crappy or whatever. Now it's like, listen, it doesn't cost any money. I mean, marginal, a couple dollars to like get a good setup, to look professional, et cetera, et cetera. If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. I want to go back to something you touched on a moment ago. I think if you look through history, anytime we're shifting technologies and modalities to the next level, we bring a lot of the old with us, right? So when silent films went to talkies, they basically pulled live theater, right? And it was just awkward, right? And then, even when film came about, it was sort of vaudeville without the sound until it found its own way, right? So the dust needs to settle. So I want to talk about sort of the business implications of this, because one of the things that we've seen is I'll paint with a broad brush here, but the days of the keynoter going in, flying in, getting their 30, 40K for 45 minutes of wonderfulness and ending in a standing ovation, that doesn't translate to Zoom. And I'm using Zoom as a placeholder here. And all the things that made that keynoter great in the ballroom at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas in front of 1,000 people, they actually have to undo that, right? So, what made a great keynoter great? They have the stage presence. They know how to work the room. They know how every moment from when they walk in, the music, the experience, the slides, the drama, being a little bit over the top because they're this little dot to most people, so they have to be large. You start to do that in a Zoom when we're all the same size box, and you're like, whoa, take it down a notch and lay off the Red Bull. So, I've seen people recalibrate there, and I don't know where the market has settled or will settle with regards to fee structure. I know that a lot of people are really hungry, desperate, stupid to some degree, all of a sudden taking 10 or 20 cents on the dollar to do something remotely. And anyway, I would love to get your thoughts on the business side of it and then sort of the craft and how it has to modify and adjust itself.
Around May 2020, there was a great article in Fast Company by Microsoft's global events director. And he was talking about how in-person events are theatrical and online events are cinematic. And so it's just like you said, if you're really big online, you're actually out of frame. It doesn't work.
Right.
What we're comparing ourselves to online is Netflix, is TV. And so the better produced virtual events are really thinking that way. And I think about it in an episodic way. Like every 7 minutes, according to brain science, we need to, as adult learners, have a state shift. So there's this idea that, we can't just be a talking head for 40 minutes. We have to show a slide, take a question from chat. We need to run a poll.
Shake people out of the trance.
Shift, yeah. Right? Use our body, move our hands, move our body, like energetically modulate our voices. So some of the things that worked on stage work, but you're right. It's a very different filter. And a lot of people who were amazing keynoters had lousy stage presence virtually at first because they didn't have great setups. They didn't understand the medium. They were not practicing this. Exactly. I was fortunate that I had a lot of experience facilitating virtually. And I didn't even realize that was a thing that I knew how to do. My first virtual happy hour, we just went around the room like all those ones did. But I knew how to keep things on time. I knew how to interrupt online. I know how to like say who's coming up next. So there was a rhythm to it. And I got to the end and everyone was like, that was amazing. And I said, y'all were just happy to see someone you didn't have to feed. The bar was set pretty low here, but I'm never
but
going
I
to do that
think,
format again.
you know, I think there's a lot of truth in what you say, in that certain things are invisible. So great facilitation in a room, you don't leave that room and say, wow, Robbie is a great facilitator. You say, wow, I had a wonderful experience. Now, if someone asks you and they double click on it, you go, yeah, actually, yeah, there weren't any pauses. Actually, the conversation flowed, but it's invisible. And I think bringing that invisible to a virtual environment is harder because, there's a whole bunch of sticky tricks that keynoters can do. Can I get a woo-ha? Woo-ha, yeah. Light up the room. Everybody stand up, like all that sort of silliness, right? We can't, I guess we could do that remotely. It would be sort of absurd.
Well, here's the things that I do. So I wear many hats, as you know, a business growth strategist. Yep. I produce virtual events. When I'm producing a virtual event, like, and when I'm particularly the speaker or running things, one of the things I do is I call people's name. So if I see someone have a reaction, I'm like, oh yeah, Peter gets it. And then you give me a bigger reaction over time. And I might develop 4 or 5 people in the audience that I'm constantly saying their names. They're constantly giving a lot of light. People are waiting to hear if their name's going to get called. You ask for the reactions. You ask for the hand raising, the ASL applause. Yeah. So, I mean, how you film it, whether you show gallery view, whether you show, like, there's definitely choices to be had. There's the fact that you engage with people. I can't tell you how many speakers ignore chat until it's time for Q&A. And I'm like, but the point of it being live and not a canned video is that if someone has a question about that slide, you don't just ignore the question. So how do you work with a chat moderator or a producer to kind of have that, moment of interjection? Like, hey, wait, before you move forward. So
Sally from Cleveland has an interesting question. We're going to
exactly. I think that if we, again, forethought, planning, intentionality followed through action, I've had a really good time online, and I'm a huge outgoing extrovert. I mean, I don't know if it doesn't come across on air, but like, I love people.
You're starting to come out of your shell, Robbie. I can tell.
Yeah. I have met more people and developed deeper relationships in the last 18 months than the prior 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's true for many of us. And we were also open for it, right? Because we're literally in a bubble. We're locked in our house. There's only so much Netflix you can watch and Tiger King, like whatever, right? And we missed some of the connections that we had that we might not have expressed the appreciation. Oh, the lady at Starbucks. Oh, I can see the faces of all the folks that I would see very often at the Admirals Club at JFK that I wouldn't consider them friends or family, but there's a familiarity, right? There's, hey, how you doing? How you like? There's a lot of that's missing. I want to end with sort of the last piece on any of your thoughts on the implications on business models. So be that for speakers and their fees, people putting on events, because I don't know that we know yet what people are willing to pay for, how much, where does their time go, where does their money go, and where that's going to settle. Any predictions or thoughts or insights there?
Yeah,
no pressure, but we're going to go back and potentially embarrassing you in a year or two. If you
I'm totally okay with it. My predictions are on the coattails of Dory Clark, so I feel okay about it. Dory Clark wrote a book, Entrepreneurial You. And it's about having multiple revenue streams. And she didn't write it with this in mind, the pandemic in mind. But I knew a lot of people prior to the pandemic who were very proud of the fact that they were only keynoters. There was like an only keynoters club. Well, they were the ones who were least prepared for this disruption. And I think
no portfolio diversification.
Yeah, exactly. That's all they did. Yep. So my friends who used to rely on keynotes, which required a lot of travel, are now developing courses. They're working directly with companies. They're creating their own courses. They're doing LinkedIn Live courses. They're doing group coaching and masterminds and one-on-one coaching and developing a much more robust way of delivering value. And I think that is the business model for all of us to consider. That the keynote is one thing in the arsenal.
So we have always said it. In fact, part of our model of working with our clients is you've got to generate 5 to 10x your revenue in non-keynote related activities, because otherwise, even if you're doing $1 million a year in keynote, that's all fine and dandy, but it is just the opener. It is paid business development. It is whatever. I agree with what you said. A little twist to that is what I would say is those that were already there or partially there or had some of those things and had courses, and maybe they weren't paying the attention it needed because they had other things, had a huge advantage than those that were literally caught flat-footed going, oh my God, I just lost 2 years worth of revenue. I've got nothing coming in and I've got to basically start all over again and figure out how I will be valued in the marketplace, which is a scary place to be when there is, time clicking away at you there.
Yeah,
Good
of course,
stuff.
they were given the time to reflect on that. And I think there was also, Peter, you and I both know there were some entrepreneurs and speakers in particular who hit the brake and some who hit the gas. And
exactly.
Some hit the brake saying, this is only going to be 3 months. This is only going to be 3 more months. This is only going to be 3 more months. This is now a year and a half. It's going to be. And I think others like myself, I mean, within days, I was like, well, okay, let me just throw this other stuff together. And I mean, there's lots of things I tried in 2020 that didn't work, but I built a 6-figure business in 8 months. So some things did work, and it's just about piloting and testing and research calls. I think that the more we get better as entrepreneurs at those quick innovation moments, seeing opportunities, testing them out, building up new revenue streams, that would really help all of us.
I think there's a window, and it's closing now. It's not closed, but it's not as open as it might have been 6 or 8 months ago, where you were able to say to a client, hey, listen, I've never done it exactly this way before, but let me tell you what I'm thinking and why. Whereas before, wait a minute, Mr. or Miss Keynoter, you've done this 100 times before. Don't tell me like that. I don't want to hear. That's why you're paying the big bucks. But let's hold hands and let's do this together. I've put some thought into it. I've experimented, but you're also saying without saying it, and it may not work as well as we planned, but I'm telling you because, hey, nobody's lived through this before. We're all living there. And I think that window's starting to close a little bit where people are going to take the level of risk and chat, and such that they did even 6 months ago. It's not closed, but I think the opportunity was to take advantage of that period of time.
Yeah, there was definitely a moment where it was easier.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise, and your extroversion is appreciated as well. So thanks, Robbie. Good to talk to you today.
Thank you.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.